So Clarissa, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nick, for the opportunity to be part of the Future Leader Forum.
You're most welcome, and it's great to have you on the show. And Clarissa, before we walk into the future, can you please tell us a little bit about your backgrounds? Where did you grow up?
Sure, Dr. Nick. I come from very humble beginnings from a very small industrial town in the south coast of KwaZulu-Natal. It's called Sipingo. It's the off-ramp just after the old airport, and it's something that most people would have just passed on their way to Amanzimtoti or Scottsboro.
And Clarissa, what was your dream career when you grew up?
Dr. Nick, growing up, I've always dreamed of reaching for the stars, quite literally. I dreamt of being an astronaut, and that was hugely inspired by the Challenger space shuttle launch in 1987, as well as the Expo that arrived in Durban in 1985. And I was very little at the time, but those two events had an immense impact on me. But however, I soon realized that dream was out of reach, mainly due to two factors: not being in the US, and as well as the restrictions of living under apartheid in South Africa. So I pivoted quite quickly into pursuing to become a commercial pilot. And it was my passion for flying that was fueled by the sense of freedom and as well seeing the world.
And Clarissa, who inspired you in your early days?
I would say, Dr. Nick, as most people would possibly at the young age, it's your close-knit family, and specifically in my case, being my mom. She was a single mother. I'd lost my dad just after I turned 6 years old. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she had 4 kids under the age of 18 to raise on her own. And I think her strength and compassion really, really inspired me. But at the same time, it inspired me in that sense, but also to become financially independent at a very young age and to ensure that I had a career, because watching her and the struggles that she had to go through in raising us without having a job, I would say definitely inspired me.
Now, Clarissa, you're leading a very impressive career. You are the group CFO at one of South Africa's leading brands. Looking back over your career, would you say there was a turning point?
Yes, I would say that the one I've just outlined was a turning point, as well as, Dr. Nick, the turning point when I finished matric. I was still pursuing piloting, and I had finished my matric, and my mom had informed me, okay, perhaps if this career does not work out, what is plan B? And I was quite adamant that I was going to be a pilot no matter what. My results were naturally quite good. So off the back of what she had asked me to do, I had applied to university in my first year, and I pursued BCom accounting as plan B. And throughout my career, or throughout my study, should I say, not really a career, but at the starting point of that, I was actually running both piloting and accountancy in parallel in that early years. I'd actually never even studied accounting in matric or in school, so I really didn't have that aspiration in my mind when I had joined university.
And Clarissa, what would you say is driving you today?
Today, I'm driven by a passion to support the growth and sustainability for a broad range of stakeholders, including society, our country, South Africa, and the African continent. And this mission also means playing a key role in developing and nurturing young leaders. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and for her future, I feel a duty to build a country where she can thrive when she grows up. My commitment lies in promoting empowerment, gender equality, especially for women. So perhaps my motivation is not as selfless as it initially sounds, but it's not for me, it's for future generations, which includes my daughter.
Now, Clarissa, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but What does the future of leadership mean to you?
Thank you, Dr. Nick. I think possibly in 5 years' time, when we relook at this interview, would probably be outdated, but let me not shoot myself in the foot in any way. But I do believe that we are currently living in a very volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, the term referred to as a VUCA environment. And then with that, people are looking up to their leaders for stability, comfort, and a sense of guidance. So additionally, it's also a leader's job to ultimately take something complex, complicated, and then to simplify it for their teams in order for execution to happen. So with that, the future of leadership speaks to a high level of EQ, which is a term that everyone is very familiar, but there's also AQ, which is the adaptability quotient, which refers to resilience, flexibility, and a proactive approach to problem solving. And this type of AQ can be developed from personal circumstances, as was the case with mine. And there's also further to this, there's social quotient and cultural quotient. The social quotient speaks to empathy, effective communication, and the ability to inspire, whilst cultural quotient is the capability to relate and work effectively across cultures, locally and internationally. And in terms of this, I believe I was well positioned in my career, having worked on 6 continents, having lived on 3 continents. So my exposure is quite vast across to cover these new skill sets that's required for future leadership. And when we juxtapose this against the fundamental requirement of the growing shareholder value, the need to balance a broad set of stakeholders, and it's not perhaps as mutually exclusive as it may first appear. If you want to get more of the above right as a leader and in the organization, this will ultimately render in better culture and more engaged employees. And then this will drive your bottom line. So for me, the future of leadership really speaks to those core skill sets that I've mentioned.
And Clarissa, looking back over your own journey, what do you consider most important for building future leaders? In other words, what is it we have to do more to develop future leaders and to enable future leaders?
I would say it's more about sponsorship, more so than mentorship. And I know we drive a lot of mentorship and even in your forums, Dr. Nick. So not to take away from that, but what I've seen that is key is sponsorship, and in both the current organization that the person would be working in, as well as externally. And it's about your name being mentioned in boardrooms that you've not yet stepped in. And this is not as easy to achieve as perhaps mentorship. And then the other portion is on execution, because it's all good and well that we have the best strategy or the most sought after strategy, right? But the difficulty always comes in the difficulty to execute properly. And perhaps sometimes the simplest approaches is often the best. And it's to balance this concept of strategy and theory versus execution and practice.
Now, Clarissa, these are challenging times as the world is stumbling from one crisis into the next. What is your advice for future leaders in terms of challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter and hopefully overcome in their career?
So there's quite a few, as you've mentioned, Dr. Nick, and you've interviewed quite a few people as well. So there's quite a broad range. But for me, if I were to narrow it down, I would say it really comes down to people being the biggest challenge in terms of trying to surround yourself with the right people. There's a fight for talent, competition for talent, retention, knowing when to build, when to buy, or when to borrow capabilities and skill sets. So people is a big one. Then there's leaders that have the right AQ, CQ, SQ that I was mentioning. Because with this comes the ability to have an open mind, be curious, hire better, seek knowledge. And I've just recently spoken at the CFO Indaba Day, and I was mentioning around the fact that hiring smarter people than yourself is quite something that not all leaders are perhaps as open to. But with this, I find that there's a vast advantage if the leader is open and curious to this, because what the challenge with that is what we're seeing is that it often leads to insecurities within leaderships, because they see the sense of replaceability and disposability, and then they actually want to steer clear of that talent. The third one I would think of would be around freedom, in terms of freedom to work where you want to and to manage your own time, be in charge of how you deliver. And I am a very focused leader as well, in terms of output driven, not time based. So in terms of be it hybrid, remote, etc., that is another challenge. And then it's building trust. It's to deliver on the promises that you are making, and that helps to build trust. I think people are just naturally not as trusting as perhaps they used to be, for various reasons of what leaders have promised and not delivered on. So I would say those are the key challenges, Dr. Nick.
And Clarissa, if you were to build or design a curriculum for future leaders, what are one or two key skills that you would like to factor in and maybe even teach?
Sure. So for me, it's continuous learning. And like I said, it's being curious, it's expanding your knowledge base. It's in making sure you are keeping up to date by conferences, by surrounding yourself with the right people. Not necessarily needing to be an expert in every field, but that you have your finger on the pulse of everything that's happening around you. And the only way to do this is to surround yourself with the right people, and to also ensure that you are continuously learning. It's diversity on all levels, be it age, experience, gender, race, backgrounds, qualifications. And in doing so, ensuring that we're bringing in inclusivity in order to mold us into a cohesive team. Because it's also one thing to have diversity, but if we don't bring in the inclusivity in order to bring in that team dynamic, we may also fail in this aspect. And then once again, people not being afraid to hire smarter than you, and surrounding yourself with good, solid people. And by doing this, Dr. Nick, I would say it will then cover your AI disruptors, your digital transformation, etc. So this speaks to a broad range in terms of those future outlook skills that's required.
Now, Clarissa, many future leaders are looking up to you. And you mentioned mentorship, you mentioned sponsorship. Can you expand a little bit on that? Can you talk a little bit about the role of mentorship and maybe your own experience?
Sure. So I've had 2 stories of unofficial mentees, both very earlier on in my career, and now later on in my career, I'm very, very self-aware as well, with the impact that I have on the younger generation. Being very at the early start of my career, I was perhaps not as aware. I have 2 instances, one at PwC, and this young lady actually spoke of the impact that I had on her at a partner leadership conference last year. So she actually mentioned that I had a one-on-one with her when she was just a trainee or audit clerk. And I took her aside and I explained to her from a professional environment of how to ensure that she is taken seriously and how that would build her in her career. And this actually changed the trajectory of her professional career very positively. And like I said, she's now a partner. The other mentee that perhaps I've was a top trainee accountant at Cecil. And I had not seen her since I had left Cecil, possibly close to 15 years ago. She actually heard my voice asking a question at an executive day conference. And she came up to me during the lunch break and mentioned to me, "Do you remember me?" And of course, I was not, I was trying to place her face. And then she says, "Yeah, we were at Cecil. And I still remember you, and you had such a big impact in my life. And I just heard your voice and I had to come up to you." And I was so touched by her sharing with me. And she said, "You were always so tough, but in your leadership style that she has now embraced in her career," and she's a CFO in her own right, she says she takes that confidence and that fairness, although it's tough, it's fair, it's the fairness that goes with it that impacted her from such a very early age. And then Dr. Nick, you also mentioned from my personal experiences, I think sponsorship, like I said, is quite important. And I think that is lacking in more so in the local environments. In my international environments that I've worked in, sponsorship in its informal capacity, I did have that in my international working environment. But in the South African environment, I do believe it is something that is lacking.
And Clarissa, are there any role models of leadership whom you have encountered and maybe even worked with that you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
No, Dr. Nick, I think your platform is an excellent one that shares these future leaders. And I would really encourage all young leaders and future leaders to have a look at all the videos that you have also interviewed with such esteemed people. And from there, I would say, well, for me personally, it's been Mteto Nyati and Shamil Joseph, both of whom I've had the opportunity to meet with in person. And for me, what stood out was their authentic voice and the simplicity in which they deliver their nuggets of wisdom. And this, they're able to basically connect at a grassroots level and then still operate at a senior level, which is a skill set that is no easy feat. Further to that, there's Magda Verjitska. She's the founder of Signia Limited, and that was my first non-executive director role in a listed company. And she's a powerhouse. She's completely bold, fierce, and ethically strong in her values. And there's Dr. Shirley Zinn and Christine Ramon, both of whom I am personally connected to of late, and both of whom have had successful transitions from in the latter part of their career, from highly successful corporate careers into the NED space. So they are still giving back to the country, even though they have left the corporate environment, and I truly admire that.
And Clarissa, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
I would say LinkedIn is the most appropriate social media platform, and I do repost for all the conferences, etc., that I do speak at as well on LinkedIn.
Thank you. And last but not least, Clarissa, what is your message to the millions of learners out there who are about to finish school, to start a career? What are maybe one or two success principles that they should keep in mind?
I would say that your initial circumstances do not determine whether or not you will be successful. And I think whether you grew up on the smallest dot on the map or the biggest city with significant opportunities, you can still change the trajectory of your life and your career. If I allowed my childhood challenges and sadness to have overtaken my life and only purely focused on the negatives and all the reasons not to be successful, I would have been stuck. I would have never been able to move forward, and I would have remained a victim. I chose to change my mindset from a very young age and strive for better and to push myself. I would never become bitter about the card that I was dealt. And instead, I always saw things as, I'll take that on, challenge accepted. And that has built my resilience and my strength in my character. That shift in mindset basically springboarded my work ethic, my corporate career, and my personal growth as a leader. And I feel like it can resonate with a wide and broad audience and with having all these life experiences that have shaped and molded me. And in a world where everything and everyone is more plugged in than perhaps the matrix itself. And paradoxically, we face a growing sense of disconnect. As human beings, we thrive on genuine connection and we crave authenticity. And if we get that right and translate it into every sphere of our lives, I would really say that that would make for a better organization, community, and ultimately a better world. So those two imparting wisdoms that I would want to share with the future leaders is something within themselves. And I believe it's something that will hold them in good stead throughout their career and personal life, which is very intertwined.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Clarissa, for sharing your leadership journey and your insights into the future of leadership, and for reminding us that it's our attitude and our mindset that determines our altitude.
Very true, Dr. Nick. I couldn't have said it better. Thank you.